9, verses 2 through 7. It can be found in the Pew Bible on page 593, and I invite you to follow along or listen carefully. Hear now the lesson. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who dwelt in a land of deep darkness, on them has light shined. Thou hast multiplied the nation, thou hast increased its joy. They rejoice before thee as with the joy at the harvest, as men rejoice when they divide the spoil. For the yoke of his burden and the staff for his shoulder, the rod of his oppressor, thou hast broken as on the day of Midian. For every boot of the tramping warrior in battle tumult and every garment rolled in blood will be burned as fuel for the fire. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be upon his shoulder, and his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and of peace there will be no end, upon the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and to uphold it with justice and with righteousness from this time forth and forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this. The second lesson comes from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 2, verses 1 through 20, and it can be found in the Pew Bible on page 889. I again ask you to follow along or listen carefully. In those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be enrolled. This was the first enrollment when Quirinius was governor of Syria, and all went to be enrolled, each to his own city. And Joseph also went up from Galilee, from the city of Nazareth, to Judea, to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David, to be enrolled with Mary, his betrothed, who was with child. And while they were there, the time came for her to be delivered, and she gave birth to her firstborn son, and wrapped him in swaddling clothes, and laid him in a manger, because there was no place for them in the inn.
Can we be thankful for the gift of music that has been shared with us this evening? On a night like tonight, oftentimes it's the music that makes the memories, and I think that is true, very true this evening. I'm so happy to be celebrating this wonderful day for the first time with all of you. And I'm thankful that my favorite gift this year is that God has blessed me with the opportunity to share in ministry with this congregation, in this community. And of course, I'm thankful that the love of my life is here to share it with us in this first Christmas together as well. I bring you good news of great joy. It's joyful that we're here tonight. For as long as I can remember, Christmas Eve service has always been one of my favorites. I think most people could say that. The hymns, the sanctuary filled with candlelight as we sing Silent Night later on, the anxious look of anticipation on the children's faces, and of course, the real reason we're here, to give thanks to God for the God who fulfills promises, who brings salvation to a broken world, who turns the world on its head, birthing a king in a humble manger. That's a visual I think we need to remember. Tonight, God touches earth. Tonight, the chasm between the here and now and the there and then is bridged by a tiny little baby. Tonight, creation is made whole. Tonight, peace will come to dwell among us. We love babies, don't we? Who doesn't love an adorable little baby, full of laughter, full of joy? Who doesn't love seeing a baby fall asleep with a bottle? Who doesn't love the sound of cooing, right? Or those laughs that they have, when you play peekaboo. Everybody loves those. We all love babies. Even sometimes changing diapers. That can be an experience as well, and not necessarily a bad one. Babies are wonderful. And that's one of the reasons that we love Christmas so much, because Christ comes to us in this form of a baby, a safe little baby. When everything is right with the world, and parents go to sleep tired because they've spent the day with the joy of their little one. We love safe little babies. And so we love Christmas. We do need to remember, though, that babies grow up, as any parent can tell you, faster than we want. But that little baby that we celebrate tonight also grew up. And it's what happens after tonight for the rest of his life that is just as important as this night, because he doesn't stay a little baby. He grows up, and he shakes some things up. And so while we can be thankful for the joy of this night, we need to remember, too, that sometimes we need to shake things up a bit. We live in a world that is broken, and while I don't want to dwell on that too much tonight, I do want you to keep in mind this image of a baby, because it's important as members of the church that we do all that we can to take care of those babies, those that are here with us tonight, and those that are around the world that sometimes get passed by. It's common that the pastor preaches a sermon this evening, but that's not what I intend to do. One of the purposes of preaching is to tell the story of Scripture in a way that's relatable and meaningful to a congregation. So I want to do that, but not in a traditional sermon. I simply instead want to tell you a story. It's not my story, but it's one that I came across and fell in love with. And I think it both tells the story of tonight in a memorable way, but it also expresses how we can continue to live God's story in a world that often is broken and desperately in need of changing. And as I tell you the story, I ask simply that you listen not only to the words that I speak, but to the Spirit that speaks in all of us, the call that each of us get, the truth that we're attuned to simply because we know the truth behind tonight, the truth behind every night, the truth that unites the here and now and the there and then, the truth that tonight God indeed touches earth. The old man sat in his gas station on a cold Christmas Eve. He hadn't been anywhere in years since his wife had passed. He had no decorations, no tree, no lights. It just was another day for him. He didn't hate Christmas. He just couldn't find a reason to celebrate. There were no children in his life, and his wife was no longer there, so he was sitting there looking at the snow that had been falling for the last hour and wondering what it was all about, when all of a sudden the door opened and a homeless man stepped through. Now, instead of throwing the man out, George, or Old George as he was known by his customers, told the man to come and sit by the heater and warm up. "Thank you, but I don't mean to intrude," said the stranger. "I see you're busy. I'll just go." "Well, not without something hot in your belly." So George turned and opened the thermos and handed it to the stranger. It's not much, but it's hot and tasty. It's stew. I made it myself, and when you're done, there's coffee, and it's fresh. Well, just at that moment, he heard the ding of the driveway bell, right? "Excuse me, I'll be right back," George said. But there in the driveway was an old 53 Chevy, steam rolling out the front. And the driver jumped out. "Mister, can you help me?" The driver begged with a deep Spanish accent. "My wife is with child. My car is broken." Well, George opened the hood, and it was bad. The block Looked like it had cracked from the cold and the car was dead. Well, you're not going anywhere in this thing. George turned away. But mister, please help. Well, the door of the office closed behind George as he went in, and a moment later he came back out, keys to his old truck. He went back out, around back, opened the garage and started the truck and drove it around to where the couple was waiting. Here, he said, take my truck. She ain't the best thing you ever looked at, but she runs real good. And George helped put the woman in the truck and watched as it sped off into the night. And he turned and he walked back inside the office. Glad I gave him that truck. Their tires were shot too. That old truck has brand new. Well, George thought he was talking to the stranger, but the man was nowhere to be found. The thermos was on the desk, empty, a used coffee cup beside it. Well, at least he got something in his belly, George thought. So George went back outside to see if the old Chevy would start, and it cranked slowly, but it started. He pulled it into the garage where the truck had been. He thought he would tinker with it for something to do. Christmas Eve meant likely no customers. He discovered the block hadn't actually cracked. It was just the bottom hose on the radiator. Well, shoot, I can fix this, he said. So he put on a new one. And those tires ain't going to get him through the winter either. He took the snow treads off his wife's old Lincoln. They were like new, and he wasn't going to drive the car. And as he was working, he heard shots being fired. And he ran outside, and beside a police car, an officer lay on the ground, bleeding from the left shoulder. And the officer moaned, "Help me." Well, George helped him inside. He remembered the training he'd received in the Army as a medic, and he knew the wound needed attention, pressure to stop the bleeding, he thought. So it just so happened the uniform company had been there that morning and had left some clean shop towels. So he used those and some duct tape to bind the wound, and he said to the officer, "They say any duct tape can fix anything," trying to make the policeman feel a bit more at ease. Something for pain, George thought. Now, all he had was the pills that he used for his back. Well, these ought to work. So he put some water in a cup and gave them to the officer. "You hang in there. I'm going to call you an ambulance." Well, the phone was dead. "Maybe I can get one of your buddies on that talk box out in your car." And he went out only to find that a bullet had gone into the dashboard, destroying the two-way radio. He went back in to find the policeman sitting up. "Thanks," said the officer. "You could have left me there. That guy that shot me is still in the area." Well, George sat down beside him. "I'd never have left an injured man in the Army, and I certainly am not going to leave you." George pulled a bandage back to check for bleeding. "Looks worse than it is," he said. "The bullet passed right through you. Good thing it missed the important stuff. I think with time you're going to be as right as rain." Well, George got up and poured a cup of coffee. "How do you take your coffee?" he asked. "Well, none for me," said the officer. "Oh, you got to drink this. It's the best in the city." "Too bad I ain't got no donuts." And the officer laughed and winced at the same time. And right then, the front door of the office flew open, and in burst a young man with a gun. "Give me all your cash, now." His hand was shaking as he held out the gun, and George could tell that he had never done this before. "That's the guy that shot me," the officer exclaimed. George said, "Son, why are you doing this? You need to put that cannon away before someone else gets hurt." The young man was confused. He said, "Shut up, old man. I'll shoot you too. Now give me the cash." Well, the cop was reaching for his gun. George said to the cop, "Put that away. We've got one too many already in here." He turned his attention to the young man. "Son, it's Christmas Eve. If you need the money, well then here. It ain't much, but it's all I got. Now put that pea shooter away." George pulled out $150 from his pocket and handed it to the young man, reaching for the barrel of the gun at the same time. The young man released his grip on the gun, and he fell to his knees, and he began to cry. "I'm not very good at this, am I? All I wanted was to buy something for my wife and son," he went on. "You see, I lost my job, my rent's due, my car got repossessed last week." Well, George handed the gun to the police officer. Son, we all get in a bit of a squeeze now and then. The road sometimes gets hard, but we make it through the best we can. He got the young man to his feet and sat him down on a chair across from the cop. Sometimes we do stupid things. George handed the young man a cup of coffee. Being stupid's one of the things that makes us human. Coming in here with a gun ain't the answer. Now sit there and get warm and we'll sort this out. The young man had stopped crying. He looked over at the cop. Sorry that I shot you. It just went off. I'm sorry, officer. Shut up and drink your coffee, the cop said. And George could hear the sound of sirens outside. A police car and an ambulance skidded to a halt. 2 cops come through the door with their guns drawn. Chuck, you okay? One of the cops asked the officer. Not bad for a guy who took a bullet. How'd you find me? GPS locator in the car. Best thing since sliced bread. Who did this? The cop asked as he approached the young man. Chuck answered him, I don't know. The guy ran off into the dark, just dropped his gun and ran. George and the young man both looked puzzled at each other. The wounded cop asked, that guy work here? Yep, George said, just hired him this morning. Boy lost his job. The paramedics came in, they loaded Chuck onto the stretcher, and the young man leaned over the wounded cop and whispered, why? And Chuck just said, Merry Christmas, boy. And you too, George. Thanks for everything. Well, George said, it looks like you got one doozy of a break there. That ought to solve some of your problems. And so George went into the back room and he came out with a box. He started to pull some stuff out of that box. First pulled out a ring box. Here you go. Something for the little woman. I don't think Martha would mind. She said it would come in handy someday. The young man looked inside to see the biggest diamond ring he'd ever seen. I can't take this, said the young man. It means something to you. George said, and now it means something to you. I got my memories. That's all I need. And George reached into the box again. An airplane, a car, and a truck appeared. They were toys that the oil company had left for George to sell. Here's something for that little man of yours. Well, the young man began to cry, and he handed back the $150 that the old man had handed him earlier. And George says, well, how are you going to buy Christmas dinner? You keep that too. Now get home with your family. The young man turned with tears streaming down his face. I'll be here in the morning for work if that job offer's still good. Nope. I'm closed Christmas Day. See you the day after. George turned around, and out of nowhere, the stranger that he'd offered coffee to before everything had happened was right there. Where'd you come from? I thought you left. Oh, I've been here, George. I've always been here. You say you don't celebrate Christmas. Well, why? Well, after my wife passed, I just couldn't see what all the bother was. Putting up a tree, baking cookies like I used to with Martha just wasn't the same by myself. And besides, I was getting a little chubby. The stranger put his hand on George's shoulder. But George, you do celebrate Christmas. You gave me food and drink and warmed me when I was cold and hungry. The woman with child, she's going to bear a son. He's going to be a great doctor. The policeman you helped is going to go on in his career to save the lives of 19 people. The young man who tried to rob you is going to make you a rich man and not take a dime for himself. That's the spirit of the season, and you keep it as good as any man. Well, George was taken aback by all the stranger had to say. And how do you know all of this, he asked. Oh, trust me, George. I have the inside track on this sort of thing. And when your days are done, you'll be with your Martha again. The stranger moved toward the door. He said, if you'll excuse me, George, I have to go now. I have to go home because there's a big celebration planned. You see, George, it's my birthday. Merry Christmas. as we begin to close